About the gingerbread house. Once upon a time, there lived a poor lumberjack's family. Dad went to break stumps and Mom took care of two children. Hansel and Gretel. When the weather was nice, Dad took the children to the forest with him. The children picked strawberries and blueberries there, and their mother baked cakes from them at home. Once my father had a job far away in the woods and he didn't want the children to go with him, because their legs hurt too much. But the children didn't rest until their father took them with him. They walked a long time along the paths of the woods until they came to a clearing, where the father left the children and commanded them to stay where they were, and not to go far, because they might get lost. And went on to work in the forest. Hansel and Gretel picked strawberries. They weren't afraid of getting lost, because they could still hear the sound of their father's axe in the distance. In a moment they had a jug full of strawberries, ate a snack that their mother had prepared for them for the journey and sat down by a tall spruce tree to rest. After all, their legs hurt. After a while, fatigue closed their eyes and the children fell asleep. When they woke up, it was getting dark quickly in the forest. The children got scared and started looking for their dad. "Daddy, where are you? Dad?" But no one answered the children. The darkness in the forest had already begun to thicken and the children began to be afraid. They walked through thickets, through bushes and tall grass. They had long since ceased to walk on the paths. They got lost. When they didn't know which way to go, Gretel said to Hansel, "Hansel, I'm afraid, climb up this tall tree and look in all directions to see if you can see a light from our cottage somewhere in the distance." Hansel was not afraid and climbed up to the top of the tree and called down to Gretel. "Gretel, I see a light." And he quickly climbed down from the tree and went with Mainka in that direction to the light. At that moment, the clouds also parted and the moon peeked out to light the children's way. They came to a large clearing, where there was a nice cottage. They came closer to her and were surprised. The cottage was made entirely of gingerbread. They both looked at her for a while, and then Hansel dared to steal a piece of gingerbread. He would be so good, sweet. Gretel didn't let herself be urged and stole a piece as well. At that moment, the door opened and an ugly old woman came out. "Who's peeling my gingerbread here?" she whimpered. And Gretel answered in a thin voice, "Nobody, it was just a breeze." So the old woman went back to the cottage again. The children were quiet for a while, and when it seemed that the old woman was asleep again, they started peeling gingerbread again. But the old woman didn't sleep. She was lurking, she knew she had guests. And before the children recovered, the grandmother was already holding their hands and dragging them into the cottage. "Come in, little children. I'm waiting for you. You'll have a very good time with me." And she locked them in a pigsty. The children there were sad and crying. But the old woman was glad to catch them and laughed at them. In the morning she pulled out of the pigsty Gretel, who had to help her with the household, and cooked fatty meals for Hansel herself so that he would get fat as quickly as possible. She was an evil witch who wanted to eat the children. She kept clapping her lips and every day tested whether Hansel was gaining weight properly and said, "Show Hansel a finger." But Hansel was clever and instead of a finger he stuck a stick in the old woman. But even that didn't help. One morning she ordered Gretel to carry a pile of wood to bake a roast. The old woman heated the oven and prepared a large shovel. When the oven was at the right temperature, she said, "Now let's bring the roast," and she pulled Hansel out of the pigsty. And it was bad. The grandmother has already pulled out her shovel and is grinning at Hansel and says, "Come, baby, sit nicely on the shovel and check if the oven is warm enough. I'll bake you cakes." But Hansel deliberately sat down on the edge of the shovel and always fell. The witch was already furious, angry and scolding. At that moment, Mainka had an idea and said, "So, Grandma, show us how to sit properly on a shovel. We don't know it." The old woman didn't suspect anything and sat on the shovel held by the children, and you put it in the oven. And quickly closed the door behind her. That was screaming. The old woman was shaking the oven door. But the children didn't care about that anymore. They ran quickly out of the gingerbread house and out into the forest. And the first path. Fortunately, it was the right path to get home. Out of breath, they ran into the cottage. There were sad parents sitting at the table, who did not believe that their children would return home. And suddenly the children in the door. Alive and healthy. That was joy and hugging. And the gingerbread house disappeared with the evil witch. And no one ever heard from her again. So everything turned out well again, dear kittens. And now let's hurry to bed. A duvet up to the chin and beautiful dreams are wished by the cat grandmother. A hug and a kiss.